Hello, I am so excited to be a part of my dear friend Pauline's course. We've known each other since elementary school. It's quite amazing that our paths have crossed back together in our adult lives with similar purpose and missions to help educate women about how to be living our best lives with our hormones. And for me, in my career as a nutritionist, it is in the gut health balance and how we can support our whole body through gut health. So I'm really excited to talk about the impact of stress on our gut today. Like I said, my name is Natalie Earle, and I am a certified functional nutritional therapy practitioner. I'm also a certified GAPS practitioner and trained in nutrition, pathology, and functional medicine. I studied physics in my undergrad, which is where all of my health issues started to culminate. And I was really starting to uh, be debilitated with a lot of cystic acne at that time, terrible PMS cramps, fatigue. I had bouts of amenorrhea and irregular periods, skin issues like eczema, but also that cystic acne I talked about, and severe mental health imbalances as well. I literally felt like my health was crumbling. I, during that time, was a vegetarian and vegan, unknowingly vegan because of certain food sensitivities that I had at the time. And after suffering for so many years, I knew that something was off with my gut. I had a lot of digestive symptoms like chronic constipation. And I finally found my way to a nutritionist who led me to focusing on primarily one thing, which was healing my gut microbiome. And through this, I was able to clear my skin, reverse my food sensitivities, and help other people. Because after that, I started really researching and getting certified to be a nutritionist myself. So, since then, I've been practicing nutrition for 6 years, and I specialize in working with clients to help them, mostly women, recover from autoimmunity, hormone imbalances, and nervous system dysregulation conditions. So many of these signs and symptoms are here listed that you might be dealing with, right? Like PMS symptoms, thyroid disease, PCOS, endometriosis. Many of my clients have menopause, fatigue, mood imbalances, acne, or other skin issues, allergies, and weight imbalances. And these are all very clear signs also of gut microbiome imbalances. And I'm going to describe exactly how and why the gut is so important. So, today, what you're going to be learning is the link between gut health and stress and your hormones. You're going to learn how to improve your hormones by reducing the main source of stress coming from inside of you. And you're also going to learn 5 nutrition and lifestyle changes that you can implement today. So, what is this gut of ours, right? So, the gastrointestinal system, ranging from our mouth all the way to our anus, is this long tube of emptiness, really, that runs through us. And Hippocrates said it himself, the father of modern medicine, that all disease begins in the gut. And this is what I hang my hat on as a nutritionist because digestion truly is the foundation to all of our health. We do not get the nutrients that we need unless we are digesting the food that we are eating. So, poor gut health leads to a lot of chronic illness and inflammation in our body, which in many different people, this can look very, very different. And it can be difficult to actually pinpoint that the gut is actually the root of this issue for someone, say if they don't have any gut health issues or symptoms clearly. However, what we now know is that gut health is a key player in overall health and all chronic illness and all of the symptoms that I listed before. And this is because we have something called the microbiome. The gut microbiome is this amazing ecosystem of microorganisms that live inside of our digestive system. This ecosystem of a community of vastly different bacteria, yeast, and fungi are all living symbiotically inside of us. We are actually more bacteria than we are human cells. So we live in a huge ecosystem and world really comprising of bacteria. They are really in control of not only our health and digestion, but really all of the DNA expression that happens for our body. So we are more bacteria DNA than human. And we have evolved to be in this relationship with these bacteria. A lot of people think that when we eat our food, we're breaking that down mechanically, and then we get the nutrients from that food. But really, what is happening is that we are breaking down that food mechanically, and then whatever that food, the components of that is feeding the different types of bacteria present, we digest the byproducts from those different types of bacteria, yeast, and fungi. And there's four main functions that the gut bacteria provide for us that we have evolved over time to have this symbiotic relationship with the gut microbiome. And the main purpose is for the nutrients, like I said. So we absorbed all the different nutrients that come from those different types of bacteria and their byproducts. The second is that they are a major role in the hormone detoxification and regulating our hormone and liver detoxification. The third is that primarily 70% of our serotonin and other neurotransmitters, so our mood and mental health, is regulated by our gut bacteria. And then fourth is where our immune system lives. 90% of our immune system lives just on the other side of the gut, the small intestines primarily, and the gut bacteria help regulate the immune expression in our bodies. So, this huge ecosystem, it's like the Amazon rainforest. And all of these scary kinds of creatures live in there purposefully. And when kept in check, when we have enough good bacteria, these protect us with our immune system from the pathogenic bacteria and things that would really create problems for us. So earlier from Pauline, you've learned that the stomach acid in our stomach is very important to be acidic. And another really important reason for that is that it protects us from the invaders of any kinds of bacteria that we might be exposed to in our environment. So when we eat certain foods, say if we're traveling, we might get exposure to a new bacteria that if it crosses through into the digestive system, past the stomach, if it's not as acidic as it should be, we can get problems. So let's talk more about the problems of what causes a microbiome imbalance, because this is one of the main culprits that is contributing to so many symptoms in our modern day. What causes poor digestion at the simplest form is stress. Stress can come from, in our modern world, can come from the different types of processed foods, as well as the different types of polysaccharides. These are long chain carbohydrates that are very difficult to digest. These are things like grains and legumes, sometimes certain nuts and seeds. These are difficult to digest plant foods that really require a lot of energy. So if we are eating these foods improperly prepared and incorrectly prepared, that can become more stressful on our body and our digestion and feed opportunistic bacteria. We also get exposed from chemicals, pesticides, herbicides, antibiotic exposure. Many of us have had one or two antibiotics in our lifetime, even things like hormone replacement therapy or birth control can negatively impact our gut bacteria and our digestion. Other hormonal imbalances can do this as well. Medications and smoking. And then this all leads to the biggest issue, which is dysbiosis. And dysbiosis is a fancy term that basically means imbalanced bacteria in our gut. So, when we have broken or sluggish digestion, we can get dysbiosis, and then that leads to more leaky gut. So, this is a picture of kind of the different types of bacteria in our gut and food that's getting digested and broken down. And this shag carpet here is the microvilli of our intestines. And these are nourished by the bacteria in our gut. So we have three classifications of bacteria, generally speaking. One is the good bacteria, two is the opportunistic bacteria, and three is the pathogenic bacteria. When we get dysbiosis, this is defined as either, and usually it's all three of these, either loss of bacterial, beneficial bacteria, overgrowth of potentially pathogenic bacteria, and also loss of overall bacterial diversity. So, if we have one or even all three of these issues in our gut bacteria microbiome, we are going to have a damaged intestinal wall, which will further deplete our bodies of nutrients. We get a lot of the dysbiosis mostly from generational trauma. Because when we are born, this is how we are inoculated from our mothers and then from their mothers through the vaginal birthing process with our microbiome. We get our microbiome from our mothers through the vaginal canal. And so if for example, your mother was not vaginally um, birthed or did not breastfeed you, then your gut bacteria is less resilient. There's less likely to be enough good bacteria to keep pathogenic or opportunistic bacteria kept in check. It's very mythological. The good always defeat the evil. And in this case, the evil are not that bad that we want to get rid of them completely, but that they want to have a natural balance among the entire ecosystem inside of us. Unfortunately, though, we get a lot of cesarean births and poor breastfeeding habits or traditions, or some people in some communities, it's okay, it's natural that one or two women would not be able to breastfeed, but usually there's a breastfeeding community that another breastfeeding mother can step in and actually provide that breast milk. Typically, that's how it was practiced in ancient traditions, and we've kind of lost some of those connections. Also, increased antibiotic use, not only just later on in our lives, but your grandmothers might have had antibiotics, and that generational trauma will follow suit with the newer generations. And so in a lot of countries now, there's more doctors who are being more uh, intentional about using probiotics after several rounds of antibiotics because they know that this has negative impacts on our genetic expression. This is a picture of all the different causes of this issue called leaky gut syndrome, which is the source of the river of toxicity coming from the gut bacteria and inside of us, creating things like inflammation, autoimmunity, nutrient deficiency, cystic acne, eczema, psoriasis, joint pain, brain fog. We get a blood brain barrier breach when we have some of this leaky, inflamed gut occurring. So, like I said before, These are all different forms of stress. Emotional stress is another trigger, but hormonal changes from pregnancy and menopause or birth control, different types of other medications, um, low stomach acid inhibits proper digestion and can lead to this dysbiosis and leaky gut, as well as certain dietary proteins. Like in the lectins family, we have the dietary protein gluten. So, no human body can digest gluten. It's a sticky protein that, when consumed, it's going to impact negatively these tight junctions of the intestinal lining and create damage to the cell lining. And so humans have become very ingenious in our ability to pre-digest certain proteins and dietary proteins through processing, like fermentation. So sourdough bread has much less pre-digested gluten. So there's not a lot of gluten in it, and most of it's all pre-digested, which makes it much easier on the gut lining. And this is why some people can, with when there's a healthy intestinal microbiome and a good tight junction, when they eat a sourdough bread, they don't get symptoms. But for many people with a imbalance of the proper bacteria, when they eat certain dietary proteins, that it's becomes much more damaging to the gut lining. So, if certain bacteria are being fed undigested proteins, we get something called lipopolysaccharides, or LPS. And this is an inflammatory marker that we can test in our blood and should not be in our blood. It's actually found in the gut. And if we are finding it in the blood, that means it's getting through the the intestinal lining, which is problematic for the rest of our body and very stressful. Low stomach acid and low production of enzymes is also another thing that can impact our gut negatively. So, if our body temperature is too low, say if we have Hashimoto's or low thyroid function, our body's not going to produce enough enzymes and stomach acid to pre digest and break down our food. And this can lead to putrefaction of the food, and this changes how much stress is on our gut. Things like antibiotics and infections, blood sugar dysregulation, toxins, and food allergies can be major components to impacting the intestinal lining negatively and creating a lot of stress on this system. This study showed that the gut microbiota regulates our hormones. So, when this process is impaired through dysbiosis of the gut microbiota, this is characterized by low microbial diversity and the decrease in the deconjugation of certain estrogens. So, when we have dysbiosis, this is really showing that we have this impairment of our hormone regulation. But there's a bidirectional relationship. So, through really supporting our hormone levels and our gut function in both directions with the lifestyle that you're doing, the lifestyle changes that you're going to be doing, and through dietary support to the microbiome, this can improve the estrogen problems that we have in our body. This study also is supporting the effects that we can have by focusing on the gut microbiome. So we can prevent gut leakiness through probiotic treatment. And it actually also impacted the HPA, or the stress response system of these rats in this study. So by supporting the microbiome, we can help with reducing stress on our body, and this will help lower our stress impact on our hormones, right? So this is really important to help with supporting our gut function. A big piece to supporting our gut function, like you saw, was the blood sugar regulation. So, by supporting our blood sugar, if we keep our blood sugar in this normal blood glucose level range and say like a lazy river, up and down, but never in extremes, we will have better hormone function, which leads to also better digestion function, right? So the less stressed we are, the more we can digest. And that's because digestion occurs the best in a rested and relaxed state. Rest and digest, right? So, if we start the day with breakfast that's very high in sugar and carbohydrates, we are going to spike our blood sugar so high that it's actually an emergency. And then your body has to release certain hormones to help with getting that blood sugar down. But because it was working so hard to get that blood sugar down, it overcorrected. And we end up on this roller coaster of blood sugar. This is a difficult state to digest our food in the first place. So, a diet that's really beneficial for the gut microbiome is also very supportive to to your hormones and your blood sugar regulation. Okay? So, it's all can be done at the same time. We don't have to do different diets, which is great. This is a picture of the effects of different nutrients on blood, especially macronutrients on blood glucose levels. So, your macronutrients are carbohydrates, protein, and fat. And we can make sure that we are kind of organizing our meals in the day in order to support our blood sugar and make sure that we're digesting our food really well and reducing stress on our digestion. So, if you can see here, if you're starting that day with a smoothie bowl or a smoothie with a lot of fruit or oatmeal, even with lots of sugar, we are going to have a very high carbohydrate spike, and that starts this roller coaster effect. But if we start the day with protein and fat, we will have a balanced blood sugar that's less stressful on the day, uh, on our throughout the day. And there's other studies too that show that if you start the day, say breakfast, you have a higher protein and fat meal with maybe some sauteed vegetables on the side or still with some oatmeal, your carbohydrate spike is much less. So if you have some of that, a smoothie bowl, but you have some healthy fats and protein in it from like a whey protein powder that's easy to absorb, then it is going to be a much better effect. And later on in the day, if you happen to have a sugary treat or some sweetened tea, then your blood sugar can actually spike less if you start the day with a higher protein and fat. So the implications later on in the day are much less stressful if you start the day correctly. So just remember that this cycle of digestion getting impaired through stress is kind of a never ending cycle, right? So we have to stop with the kind of the highest part of the cycle, right? Like a higher up the chain. And that's with really supporting our digestion. Poor digestion, oops, can lead to chronic stress. Chronic stress continues the leaky gut cycle. And with more nutrient deficiencies, we get in a more stressed state in the body. This leads to chronically high cortisol and chronically high insulin. Both of these hormones can have a negative impact on all of the rest of our sex hormones. So, as well as our digestive hormones, right? Insulin is a digestive hormone. And when we have chronic stress, we can get something called hormonal resistance, specifically insulin resistance, which is one of the main contributors to irregular periods and PCOS and endometriosis. It all comes down to metabolic health with blood sugar. So the feedback loop of hormones works best when there is actually a temporary absence of the hormones, right? So on our hormonal cycle, estrogen spiking and then it drops, right? So that is a helpful thing for our hormones to regulate themselves. And similarly with insulin, I'll show you some examples, but when you eat insulin is going to be released. And so you want to be eating actually less frequently so that we're not having chronic levels of insulin produced all of the time. So the three main sources of stress on our gut is the blood sugar dysregulation. And we also want to prioritize the reduction of overgrowth bacteria. And then through these processes, overall, we want to support balanced microbiome. And so this is going to get at the main source of stress, the river of toxicity in your gut that is contributing to disease and imbalances with your hormones. So here are some of the practical things to help with this. What does the diet look like? A nutrient dense carbohydrate for the gut microbiome is actually going to look like this bottom picture less than the top picture. We want local, seasonal, colorful, and organic fruits and vegetables, some nuts and seeds in moderation. Grains and legumes, and also some nuts and seeds, we do these in moderation because they are more difficult to digest proteins and carbohydrates actually. So they're, these protein sources like beans and grains, they're also very high in carbohydrates and they're not as nutrient dense. The different colors that we get from vegetables and fruit supply us with more polyphenols and other vitamins and nutrients in a more condensed way. And the importance of eating local and seasonal of these carbohydrates is because what your body knows how to digest is based on the light signals that we get from the sun. So we can have different sunlight exposure at different latitudes throughout the world. So if you live around the equator, you can get these signals from the sunlight that tell you that you can eat a lot more plant foods. When you live further up in the equator or from the equator, right? So you have winter time, you want to look around and see what would normally be growing in your season, in your region at the different seasons. And that is because the different light exposure you're getting is going to impact your digestion a lot. So the local and seasonal is so important. And one of the challenges to the global food system is that we've gone away from eating a lot of these foods more seasonally. So, and unfortunately, we can get into a lot of trouble when we eat things like spinach every single day, in a smoothie or a spinach salad every single day for a whole year. The challenge with that is that all plant foods actually contain different anti-nutrients that protect the plant because all plants cannot run away from their predators. So the plants actually have different chemicals. Some, like in spinach, the one is called oxalates, and the damage to the bodies that humans can have from overexposure of these plant chemicals and the oxalates specifically can impact our digestion. It can impact our thyroid. They find oxalate buildup in the thyroids in Hashimoto's and Graves' disease. So we don't want to be consuming these foods out of their local season or like every single day of the year. A lot of grains and legumes are also very high in oxalates, actually. And so these, again, are something that are good in the diet in moderation, only if the gut bacteria is really optimal. When we have a balanced bacteria and we don't have dysbiosis, grains and legumes and bread and things like that gets digested very well. Unfortunately, though, these different carbohydrate sources are very long chain carbohydrates. They're very starchy. And these sugars don't get broken down if our digestion is impaired. So then they will feed opportunistic bacteria because they've fermented and they're not fully broken down. And the favorite food of the dysbiotic bacteria are starches. So if you imagine, we normally a healthy gut would have more good than bad. So the polysaccharide starches are coming in and they're feeding both at this range, and so the good are still keeping the bad in check. If we have it opposite, we have less good bacteria and too many of the opportunistic. Every time we eat grains and legumes and polysaccharide starches like potatoes, these are going to feed more of the opportunistic. And until we can starve out the main food source, the starches, from the opportunistic enough so that the good are above them, when we add these foods in, they're going to be problematic. So, a lot of the clients I work with, we will temporarily remove grains and legumes and potatoes, mostly, maybe some other starchy foods, to make sure that we are getting this balanced. And then when we reintroduce them, the good bacteria are ahead and they don't have any problems with the healthier, nutrient dense carbohydrates. The last thing is it's very important to properly prepare things like grains and legumes and nuts and seeds. These are parts of the plant that do not want to be eaten. And so these parts of the plant are the seeds. They want to be eaten by a animal and pooped out, and then they can be fertilized and make a new plant. That's their goal. So if you eat these foods without soaking, sprouting, or fermenting, and then for grains and legumes, if you cook them in a pressure cooker, that also can, after you've done all of those steps, you will unlock more of the nutrients, and the grain or legume or nut and seed is unable to become a live new plant afterwards. So you get to digest that. So we have to pre-digest these foods and in order to get the nutrients from them. That's why these are harder to digest for someone who has the gut imbalances, and we have to do these things to protect our gut. We need to do the fermentation, the soaking, and the sprouting to unlock the nutrients. So, soluble fiber is really important to detox our hormones. Fiber is a tool, so it's used in the gut if the gut is already balanced. So, if you're eating fiber and you don't have gut issues or any of the symptoms that we talked about before, you are probably good to eat the fiber. If we don't have a healthy gut and we have dysbiosis, it's kind of like inflammation is like a bonfire, right? It's like this runaway bonfire flame that is, all these microvilli are shriveled up and damaged. And it's like a raw wound. It's like a cut on your arm. And when you have a cut, you don't want to rub sandpaper on that cut. Fiber is like sandpaper, or it's like gasoline that you're just pouring onto a inflamed tissue. So when we have dysbiosis, when we have leaky gut, fiber is not your friend. So eventually you can use soluble fiber in the future, but we absolutely want to avoid insoluble fiber. That's like your grains and cereals and things and fortified kinds of fiber products. We don't want to do those. Soluble fibers, though, are going to be in high concentrations in some of these really wonderful plant foods like avocados, onions, carrots, okra, Brussels sprouts, their chicory. Those are all high in soluble fiber. And so soluble fiber can be more of a friend, especially after you've done some gut healing. But I love this study this study because it really encourages the best thing for your gut, which is don't I'll summarize it for you. So basically, this study, they took people to who were having some gut issues and they had low microbial diversity, and they put some people on a high fiber diet, and then they put the other group on a high fermented food diet. And the people who were on the high fiber diet actually had more inflammation and no change actually in the gut diversity. So it did not do what they thought that it would do. And in contrast, alternatively, the high fermented food diet steadily increased the microbiota diversity. It improved the good bacteria and it decreased the inflammation in the gut. So yes, as much as fiber is beneficial to the gut, it in this study, it actually showed that it's not that beneficial. And what's even more beneficial is fermented foods. So fermented foods are things like sauerkraut, yogurt, kefir. In every culture, what I love is that cultured food is all fermented. So cultured food is the term for fermented foods, and every culture has their own style and different tweaks on how to do that. So we want to look really far back in nature and human lifestyles and cultures to see what were the best ways to pre-digest and ferment our food, because what that does is it unlocks nutrients, it increases the bacterial diversity, and increases the ease of digestion. It reduces stress on our digestive system. So, the nutrient dense proteins that we want to also focus on for our gut health are the bio individual proteins from animal based protein. This is things like wild caught seafood, meat from grass fed or pastured animals or wild game, and pasture raised poultry and eggs living their best lives. So that when the animal is living its best life and eating healthy, it's going to be eating its natural diet. It's going to be the most nutrient dense for us. And we want to also make sure we're eating nose to tail. The different types of plant proteins are not going to require or provide your body with all of the different amino acids that your body requires. They've done so many studies comparing this, and you need to be eating way too many of these plant foods to get adequate protein, which is problematic for your gut function. I can't tell you how many people, and in my own experience, who lean so heavily on these plant foods for too long. For in my case, I was vegetarian and vegan for 8 years, and it completely wrecked my digestive system. So these animal proteins are more bioavailable, meaning your body doesn't have to work as hard to digest them. All across the board, anatomy will tell us that our stomach can easily break down, especially raw meat. But then also, like cooked meat would be the second best digestive, easy to digest food. So this is where our stomach is going to be able to break these proteins down properly to help with creating the building blocks for our entire body. The last thing is the nutrient dense fats and oils. We want to avoid the fats or oils that are the commercialized oils. So, in the last 100 years, we've had industrialized commercial oils like canola oil, cottonseed oil, safflower, sunflower, grapeseed oil. All of these oils are undergoing extreme processing to be liberated from wherever they came from. So, nuts and seeds are very difficult to extract fat from, and it actually denatures the fat and makes it toxic to our body to use during that processing. So none of them should be in our diet at all. That's what I want to emphasize, is that we should 100% be avoiding these oils. The nuts and seeds, if we eat them whole, we can get as much of the oil that we need from them. And so the other animal fats that we're left with are the most bioavailable and um, the most important to get the proper nutrients from. So fats not don't just provide lubrication and flavor to our food. They actually provide us with specific nutrients like vitamin D, vitamin A, vitamin K, and vitamin E. So we want to have things like butter and egg yolks and tallow and lard and chicken fat. All of these things are so nutrient dense and they are ancestral. Humans have been eating them for hundreds of thousands of years before these industrialized nuts and seed oils have joined us in our modern food system in the last 100 years. So, again, I cannot emphasize enough thinking seasonally, locally, and ancestrally. So, thinking about how humans would have been gathering food and storing food in your local area can guide you in this confusing and more modernized, fad diets and fad foods, superfoods that are found all over the world. What's actually best for you is likely right in your area and right at your farmer's market, at your local rancher's place, and you can get access to all the local vegetables that you need from certain farmers that you can get connected to. This is the first and number one thing I focus on with my clients because if we heal our gut, then we can really nourish and reverse the nutrient deficiencies and reduce the toxicity that's going into our bodies. And how we do this is again by focusing on what to eat instead of what not to eat. So I hope you have gained things that you can focus on eating instead of what not to eat in this talk. But the four cornerstones that you can keep in mind for gut healing are I've derived these cornerstones from the Gut and Psychology and Gut and Physiology Syndrome protocol by Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride. But these are fermented foods and meat stock and bone broth. Not as much bone broth, but bone broth is okay for some. But meat stock is a shorter cooking time and much more palatable for people to get started with drinking and making soups out of. But I've provided recipes for Pauline to share with you, and I have blog posts on my website that you can read about as well. Non-starchy vegetables are incredibly important for our gut microbiome diversity, and we want to keep these in because though animal foods are so important to rebuild that intestinal lining, we also do need some of these plant foods to help with our body providing that soluble fiber to help with detoxification. And then lastly, the organ meats. These Eating nose to tail the animal is the most honoring thing that you can do to an animal's life. The whole animal is worshipped in all of the ancestral traditions. They would primarily focus on eating the organ meats because they actually, in studies now, we know that these organ meats are superfoods. These are the most nutrient dense foods on the planet, and most of our society actually just throws them away. In some other traditional kind of communities where they've like held on to more of their culture, these organ meats are still used and they are better for it. So make sure you are eating your organ meats. For me, it was hard to get into because I never liked the taste. I didn't grow up with it. But there are luckily some great ways now in our busy lives to get organ meats in. One of my favorites with clients is actually using organ meat supplements to get started. And you can do something like ancestral supplements or heart and soil supplements or cottage supplements. I don't have a specific affiliation with any of them, but all of them are very helpful to getting started with eating specific organs that are going to benefit your own organs in your own body. Make sure you are increasing healthy fats because fats are what our hormones are made of. And like I said earlier, the fats are going to help with really balancing your blood sugar so that your gut is less stressed. So it's very balancing to our nervous system to have enough fat in our body because our brain is primarily made of fat, and we need to nourish our body, our brain specifically, our nervous system, and keep us calm with a lot of healthy butter and fat and things like that, like ghee are good examples. When we do this, and as well as doing things like intermittent fasting within our the best times of our cycle, this helps with the insulin resistance. So what we eat determines how high insulin spikes, right? Like if it's too much carbohydrates, we get a lot of insulin. But when we eat also determines how persistent the insulin is. So if we're eating multiple times a day, snacking all day long, we are going to have chronic levels of insulin, which creates that hormonal resistance. So if we end up eating 2 to 3 meals a day with no snacks, and then we are fasting 12 to 14 hours overnight, that is going to give our insulin a break and allow our hormones to properly function. Historically, we never ate as much as we did. Snacking is a industrialized marketing ploy for you to get more for you to buy more of the marketed industrialized food. So resist the temptation and the ads and the marketing to eat a lot of the snacks along your day. We want to severely cut out the food sources for these opportunistic bacteria. We have to cut out the hidden sugars and toxic ingredients. Starches that feed the opportunistic bacteria are primarily these foods. And I have a list on my website that you can download that will give you a full list of certain foods that, if you want to keep working on your gut microbiome, that I would avoid for a temporary period of time. And then you would reintroduce those after that, give it 6 months at the minimum, I would say. So go ahead and go to nutritionwithconfidence.com and you can download that free list. These are some of those common additives that I know Pauline's taught you to avoid, and the many different names for sugar. So not all of these names are bad, right? Like things like honey is a natural food found in nature, but most of these other foods are just some other form of processed sugar that we've made up. And there are many, many more. Every year, there's something new that's going to be like, this is a new healthy sugar. And no, sugar is sugar. And even something like honey in too much quantity can be problematic to our body because of the fructose. The fructose gets metabolized through the liver directly. And if your liver is trying to process your hormones and you're eating too much honey, that can be problematic. That might be making a sluggish detoxification of your hormones. But honey is one of my favorite sugars that I love for my clients, as well as fruit. Fruit sugars are really ideal for our bodies. Doing an elimination nutrition protocol, which is focused on reversing food sensitivities, is the goal. So for me, this is what I did was the gut and psychology syndrome protocol, which avoided those starches and the that fed the opportunistic bacteria. During so, we focused on all the foods that are going to fix the leaky gut. And I reversed my dairy intolerance, my egg intolerance, my gluten intolerance, all of those things. And now I am acne free, feeling no hormonal imbalances at all. And it's possible. I'm here to say that it's absolutely possible to not get stuck avoiding certain foods for your health. And really rebalancing your gut microbiome is the ticket out. Last bit here is just to help you with those irregular periods. And these are my favorite things that I like to use. Things like raspberry leaf tea. You can drink 5 cups a day to regulate your cycle. I love to drink 3 cups for on this onset of a period, because, or when you start your menses, right? Because it helps with the cramping so well. You can use cinnamon and raspberry leaf tea to be helpful for amenorrhea. And if you are having heavy bleeding, you do not want to do a lot of cinnamon because that will increase the blood flow. Vitex or chaste tree berry is a very supportive herb that I like to use for irregular cycles. So you don't have to use it for very long, only 1 or 2 months, and it will bring on the cycle. Usually, you would get on the Vitex, take it from the end of your cycle. Sorry, when you after you stop bleeding to the next cycle, so you can cycle it that way. Lastly, I have a gut healing recipe guide and other autoimmune guides that are going to help you along your gut healing way. And I also work one on one with clients. And if you get stuck in any way, I'm sure I can help you because of all the different people that I have also um, supported in their journey. But I am so grateful to have been able to walk you through the beginnings of your gut healing journey and reducing stress to improve your digestion and your hormones. Have a great day.